The Silver Arrows managed to score their second top three finish in 2 races, meaning that now their race pace is definitely where they wanted it to be back in 2022. But after 18 months of delaying the obvious wrong design, Mercedes are now more than happy to introduce even more upgrades to the W14, ones that will come in a huge package in Silverstone, with Wolff elaborating more on what we should expect out of the team in the next couple of races, with the emphasis being on Silverstone, Budapest and Spa. Mercedes fans, this video is especially for you, as those 18 months are now long behind us. When Mercedes introduced the new package in Monaco, everyone was flabbergasted as to whether or not it was the right move for the team's development path. From Barcelona onwards, it turned out that the majority of Mercedes' weak points, such as the medium and high-speed corner balance, were fixed with the newest upgrade additions. But in Monaco, we were still able to see that the floor of the car is something that's looking pretty dull compared to the RB19's complexity. Truth be told, every other car has no business comparing their floors with the engineering masterpiece of Red Bull, but the reality is as it is, and Mercedes is by far leading the pack in terms of whether or not they can catch up to the Austrian team. The vibes in Brackley are certainly positive, as Mercedes came from a double podium finish and would have likely had a P3 and P4 finish in Canada, a track that they believed wouldn't suit them too much due to its nature. But with Russell experiencing reliability issues after he lost attention on one of the curbs in Montreal and smashed the front and back of the car into the wall, it was only Hamilton, the driver, that was left out there to win points for the Silver Arrows. For the Mercedes fans that are worried about Hamilton not being able to outpace the Aston Martin of Alonso, worry not. According to the Silver Arrows, this is not a thing that will happen frequently in the future, especially after the W14 receives a reincarnation on the majority of the parts. As per Hamilton and Russell, one of the biggest issues prior to the major upgrade being brought and installed on the W14 was the rear axle of the car. This was mostly due to the cockpit being placed further forward than in previous years. But for this to be fixed even better than it was for the remainder of 2023, Russell and Hamilton would have to wait for another year, as the whole chassis would have to be reconstructed. However, the more immediate fix has proven to be working wonders for both Brits, as Mercedes managed to fit in a new front suspension setup for the Monaco GP last month. The reposition of the wishbone has been primarily introduced to work in tandem with the new side pod concept by improving airflow and cooling. However, the greater capacity to adjust geometrics is also a huge factor in improving the stability of the car. Andrew Chauvelin is the first one to talk about these upgrades, and we need to talk about them because this would automatically lead us to our next and main topic, Mercedes' newest upgrade package for Silverstone. When talking about this, the trackside engineer said, "It's a case of trying to play with those geometrics to get an influence on the aero platform to try and get a bit more stability in the car. It's probably given us more freedom because the issue that we always had prior to that was getting good front end when you needed it at the apex and good entry stability when you're hard on the brakes and turning in. That compromise was always something that we couldn't resolve. You're always left with either a weak rear on entry or a poor front at apex, so hopefully that's moved us in the right direction." Definitely, after witnessing Mercedes' performances in Barcelona and Montreal, the team has moved in the right direction and managed to keep the competitiveness high, not only against Aston Martin, but against both Ferrari and Perez as well. The latter ones seem to be even more amazing because Perez is driving the fastest car on the grid, and Ferrari introduced an upgrade of its side pod design that they hoped would help them breeze past Mercedes in the upcoming weekends. I guess that didn't turn out well for the Maranello team, and now Mercedes is looking to bring even bigger upgrades to the W14 in the upcoming races, such as the one in Silverstone. Toto Wolff confirmed that there's something new coming on the closest track that they can call home, and Russell echoed his opinion as well. But with a completely new design that involved a new floor as well, what would the option for Mercedes be in terms of upgrading a certain part of the car that has yet to reach its peak? paradoxically enough, Mercedes are likely to apply changes to the floor again, mostly because what they saw on Red Bull's car in Monaco was more than enough for them to prove that while they're moving in the right direction, they still have a long way to go when it comes to competing with the Austrian machinery and with the raging bull of Verstappen ahead. But truth be told, from a team that announced that Red Bull would win every race in 2023 to a team that is now looking more and more aggressive with every weekend passing by, Mercedes have already made a huge step, and while that might not be seen with race wins, it's definitely seen with the behaviour of the car. This is something that Hamilton and Russell have spoken about, adding that the car is feeling better than ever, and now all they have to do is extract the full potential out of it and make sure that they're the thorn in the eye of Verstappen. James Allison is here to make sure that things go down the road as smoothly as possible, and when talking about the floor of Red Bull, he did say that his team of engineers is paying close attention to the pictures from Monaco. However, he also mentioned that just because you can see it, it doesn't mean you can replicate it and install it on your own car, as one of the main weaknesses in 2023 for Mercedes is their narrow chassis, something that suited the no-pod side pod design. Nonetheless, Wolff agreed that the competitiveness of both drivers in the W14 has been raised through the roof, and when asked about the qualifying session, whether or not he believes that his drivers have what it takes to beat Alonso, something that didn't happen, Wolff was full of optimism, something that we don't really that often see from him in times like this. But what brought the most attention to this entire situation is his approach for Silverstone, the track at which the W14 will see yet another revamping, only this time it might not be as visible as everybody thinks. When talking about this, Wolff said, "Yeah, we're bringing a larger one in Silverstone, and then we should have another one before the shutdown. It's just that the learnings have accelerated a lot since we changed some of the concept's architecture. There should be decent steps coming in the next 4 races." For us, we didn't expect to perform in Canada because of the car's DNA at the moment, so it's encouraging to not be so far away. But one must not forget, Max is still having an easier time in the front, not cruising, but still I think there is margin. So there's quite the gain to catch up. Obviously, the number one goal for Mercedes in the remainder of the season would be to catch up to Red Bull, but in order for them to do that, they need solid upgrades for the remainder of the season, something that they can bet that Aston Martin would do as well. What they can also bet on is that Aston Martin cannot rely on Stroll's solid performance as much as they can on Alonso, and the Silverstone-based squad is slowly but surely turning into a one-man operation, something that is likely currently starting to happen at Red Bull as well. This is definitely something that can be utilised by the Silver Arrows, mostly because they have 2 drivers that are constantly finishing close in the points. Yep, Russell's mistake did cost him a lot of points, and if we're being honest, this isn't something that Russell is doing very often. And you can't always bet against him making a mistake or ruining his team's race like that. With that being said, there's a lot of catching up to do at the front, but with the newest upgrades being brought to the W14, one could only imagine where the limit is for the ever-growing Brackley-based squad. With the floor being the number one thing they're aiming to change in the next batch of regulations, we might see a very close battle between Mercedes and Red Bull, with the Silver Arrows desperately trying to show their customer company that they're not 8 times consecutive Constructors' World Champions without a reason.